Okay, well, welcome to the show. Good to have you here. Uh, let's start with your why for competing in HYROX or anything else that you do. What's the motivator behind it?
It's a hard question and an easy question. I think my why is pretty intrinsically motivated. I love any opportunity I can get to push myself, whether it's in athletics, in my professional career, in pickleball, which has been an extremely popular hobby of mine over the last 6 months. I think any way that I can find a way to continue progressing in something is a very exhilarating feeling for me. And I think HYROX is a perfect sport for that. It's a very measurable race. We know what we're about to get into every single time. 8 stations, 8 runs, and it's similar to track and field, which is my main background that I came from. I was a sprinter in high school and college. So I kind of took that attitude of wanting to continue to find progress, when I was a collegiate athlete and finding a new sport and endeavor that kind of was able for me or allowed me to kind of pursue something at a full-time level, is something that I was really looking for when I graduated college. So
Yeah.
I think my why is I'm a competitive person. I like finding anything I can do and being the best that I can be for myself. Whether it's HYROX or anything else, you'll be hard pressed to find me not being competitive in something. I tell myself that I'm the most competitive person I know. But at the same time, I don't take myself that seriously. So I have goals for myself. I love pushing myself. But at the end of the day, it's a sport that is super fun. It's a
Okay.
sport that so many people can do. It's available and able, and now the sport has grown to so many countries and areas of the world that I think it's a great opportunity for other people to find the best out of themselves too. So I think that's my why is I like to see what version I can be while utilizing the sport as a vessel to get there.
Okay. Amazing. Are you competitive with other people as well, or is it always just like with yourself? If you feel like you've run the best race but you finished fifth, can you
I
be
think
happy?
I I th I wanna say yes. I think it's hard for me to control what other people are doing and control other people's, work and progress and their timeline. I had a pretty tumultuous climb to the top in this sport, and for me to sit there at the end of a race and say I got 5th place, but it was a 5th place that I was perhaps coming back from an injury or had a lot of personal life things that got in the way of my training. It's hard to really stay competitive with other people when in reality, this journey has been just a journey of fighting against myself. So I mean, I'm a competitive person by nature. Of course, like I want to win. Every time I step on the start line, I want to, win and achieve a goal of being the best in the sport. But at the same time, this journey has been all about me versus me. I know what I want to do each time I step on the race course. I know what things I'm working on. I know what strategies I'm focused on. So at the end of the day, the result is a result for myself and myself only. And I try really hard to not look at other results that are perhaps in front of me or from other people that might be a little bit faster than I or stronger than I. Um, so I think in this sport, it's something that I kind of just focus on myself and my individual performance. Back in 2020, I almost took myself a little bit too seriously in the sport, wherein if I wasn't winning every race that I went to, and in 2020, it was a little bit different than what it is now. I mean, the course layout was quite drastically different. We were pushing 25-meter sled lanes instead of 12 and a half, and the rope was insanely long. But that was back in the day when I had an expectation for myself to be the best. I was 18 to 22. I was training at a pretty high level in track and field and cross country. And in college, the expectation was you always should be winning. I was competing at a Division 1 level. A lot of girls I was racing against were racing in the Olympic trials, and I had some teammates that were Olympians. And the expectation in college was you show up to a race and you win. And if you don't win, something went wrong. And that was very opposite of kind of how I view my results these days. But it was throughout that process and throughout navigating kind of the mental turmoil of that that allowed me to kind of take a step back and reframe and refocus my mindset around results. I can't control how other people do. I can't control other people's training. I can't control the motivation, the drive, the time that people have to put into training. So, in turn, I feel like I have to be content with only really looking at my result and my result only and being happy or unhappy with any result that I might get in the sport.
Okay, great answer. Can you? We've touched on it a little bit, but your sporting background and a
Mhm.
tumultuous journey to get to where you are. So
Uh-huh.
you said you're a Division One athlete, and did you say you were sprinting in college?
So I so in high school I was a sprinter. 100, 200, 300 hurdles, which was my best event, and the 800. So like sprinting middle distance. But when colleges were recruiting me, they really liked the fact that I was a hurdler and a middle distance 800-meter runner. They were like, that's so unique. We think you could be great at the heptathlon. We think you could be great at steeplechase. And that was kind of my edge in the recruitment process is, oh my gosh, you're the jack of all trades but master of none, right? I was good. I was good at the 300 hurdles. I was really good at the 800 at the state level. But the recruitment process kind of solidified a lot of, teams that were looking for somebody who could do a little bit of everything. So when I decided to run track and cross country at the University of Illinois, or I was just track at the time, they kind of wanted to develop me into a middle distance runner. So I came from, fast twitch, 100-meter, run as fast as you can, to, hey, let's try and utilize your middle distance talent because, we are looking for somebody on our middle distance squad and somebody to potentially like hold a spot down in our cross country team. So I begrudgingly decided, sure, that sounds like a good path for me. When I think my roots were always into sprinting. Prior to track and field, I was a soccer player, basketball, volleyball, softball. I did a little bit of everything. But it was always the short distance things that really excited me and lit my fire. I think there's something so exhilarating about being the fastest person there. Of course, fast is relative, fast in a mile versus fast in 100. But, I was always the Usain Bolt. I was always looking up to Usain Bolt, Noah Lyles, all those 100-meter sprinters. But then I kind of transitioned a little bit into middle distance in college. I found some success in college, but it was completely riddled with injury all 4 years. It got as bad that in 2018, I remember the date, it was February 14th because it was Valentine's Day. February 14th, 2018, I fractured my sacrum, which is like your tailbone for people who don't know. And the root cause of that was just too much running. There was no, concrete thing that they told me that I did anything wrong. It was like, "Oh, you're just running too much. You're breaking down your body too much." But this was after 6 stress fractures previously. So obviously there was something that needed to be done as far as why is this happening? Should I even be running anymore? But at that time, and unfortunately at that time, I mean, college athletics is a business. They need somebody who can be available, healthy, and able to score points at the Big Ten level and the national level. So and the day after February 15th, I signed an agreement with the medical director of my school saying I would never compete in NCAA Division One collegiate athletics again because I was too injured. So what they call it is a medical hardship waiver. So after that, I thought, and my doctor told me I should never run again. So I believed that. I was 20 years old, 21 years old. So I looked up to authority and I thought whatever authority says is correct and the truth. So I was theoretically removed from my team. The entire thing I've been working my life to doing is competing in collegiate athletics and potentially going to the Olympics. That was my goal, when I was younger. But signing that hardship waiver really, I mean, changed a lot in my life. It took away my identity.
What was the reason for signing a waiver? What was the purpose of that?
So the purpose of that was the medical team, the healthcare team, did not think it was safe for me to continue running. And if I did continue running, they kind of wanted to cover
Right.
themselves, wherein like, oh, you shouldn't be running anymore. We don't want to risk you running again because what if you have a catastrophic injury that might, take you out for the rest of your life, or like something that's extremely debilitating. So they didn't want to take that risk on me. They're like,
Okay.
you're too injured, sign this hardship waiver. You're never allowed to compete in D1 collegiate athletics again. It happens a little bit more frequently than you would think. I had another girl on my team that had to sign a medical hardship waiver due to the same issue, just too many stress fractures. There was no root cause ever, figured out, like, why me? Why her? And there was a few things that we can perhaps go into as far as like nutrition and fueling myself appropriately or not appropriately. But at that time, it was like, all right, we don't want you to run anymore. Get out of here. We want to have somebody on our team that is healthy, that can compete, and like I said, score points at big meets. So that was the journey that started this whole HYROX thing. So from 2018 till now is the tumultuousness that I described a little bit earlier.
Okay. So you sort of touched on it, but in hindsight, was it nutrition? Were you underfueled, or do you think it was something else? Too much running, or what?
I think it was a combination of a few things. I think number one was definitely the nutrition piece. When you're competing, and I know a lot of runners, a lot of women runners and men runners too, they're at that time, it was 2015 to 2018, there was an aura of skinny is fast. And that's what everyone believed in, because you saw the small girls win championships, you saw the small girls run really fast. And when you have people on your team that are kind of also echoing that theme of, let's maybe skip breakfast today, or for lunch let's just have a salad. When I looked up to those girls, that's just what I thought was the right thing to do. So in the thick of it, I never really like, got really deep into potential eating disorder journey, but I think it was, I'm sure, something of the like, where, we're running 45 miles a week and cross training 10 hours a week on top of that. I wasn't feeling myself appropriately whatsoever. Some girls could get away with it. They could eat, a salad for lunch and chicken breast for dinner and run 50 miles and be healthy, and perhaps they were the lucky ones. But for me, it was a clear sign of underfueling, made my bones and joints and ligaments and muscles not recover enough. So when I would pound the pavement day in, day out, my body was just slowly and detrimentally breaking down. Um, it was at the same time though, that was just the norm. You know, we had an athlete dining hall where every sport ate there. We were treated very well, but it was crazy to sit at the distance table and see their plates for dinner. It was no carbohydrates, just chicken breast, salads, and that was the lifestyle that I just kind of fell into. I wasn't going to do anything different. I looked up to these ladies, and they weren't getting injured as frequently as I was, so I thought it was a me problem.
Mhm.
But now, flash forward 8 years later and being, retrospective, looking in a retrospective lens, obviously that had something to do with my incessant injuries. I had a plethora of tests done, bone density scans, blood tests to kind of figure out why I was always getting injured. Nothing came back alarmingly weird, which kind of made me realize, again, in retrospect, I'm sure it was because of the nutrition that I was lacking throughout that time period.
Yeah.
With
Okay.
training 20 hours a week and not eating, inevitably you're gonna get injured.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy that like there was that sort of mindset. It's not like it was 25, 30 years ago. It's like
Right.
relatively
Oh,
recent.
yeah, it was a decade. And that's
Yeah.
it. Uh-huh. And that was always, and it was the norm, which was just so crazy. I only hope, like, and before we move on, I only hope that the lifestyle and the trajectory of that has changed quite a bit. I think with the advent of more robust social media and people seeing stronger girls be fast, I hope that just changes, like, the theme that I was so ingrained in college, that eating more allows you to feel better, which allows you to recover more, which allows you to push more in workouts. I
Yeah.
just hope it's changed.
Yeah. And I do like even conversations like this and people like you pointing it out on podcasts, I think can only help, um, especially for HYROX, obviously. Do you feel like, I mean, obviously, I'm guessing your nutrition is in a better place now, but do you feel like HYROX, like the way it's set up, the 1 kilometer run split with stations and things like that, do you feel like that's better suited to you and like for avoiding injuries?
Mhm. I think so. I think, having a variety in my training and not just solely focused on pounding the pavement and running every day, I think allowed my body to kind of build up the strength it needed to get better at HYROX in general. I also think it was a journey still within HYROX. That mindset around, like, underfueling and, trying to get faster as being smaller changed or took a long time for me to change. I think it wasn't until I took a little bit of a hiatus from HYROX in 2020 to 2022 where I focused solely on academics and not sport anymore that I kind of just inherently had to reframe my thought process with eating. I wasn't training really much at all, so I had no like gauge on my fuel and how my fuel would impact my outcome in sport. So when I came back to the sport in 2022, I kind of had a fresh frame of mind. I understood that the nights that I wouldn't eat enough or have a snack before bed were the days that I had pretty tough workouts the preceding day. So it's a long journey. I mean, I think it's still a journey. Now I very hardly ever think about food. That's something I always thought about when I was, 18, 19, because I was always hungry. It's like, oh, when's my next meal? But my next meal is only gonna be salad. Now it's I fuel myself to satiation. I eat as many meals as I can because I want to get the best performance out of myself. It's never anymore about what do I look like. In college, it was pretty correlated, am I small enough? Am I skinny enough to run fast enough? And now it's like, I hope I ate enough to fuel my workout. And now it's to eating to satisfaction and eating for performance. That mindset shift happened not overnight. It took many years to develop. But I think it took me going through something so drastic, like getting all these injuries, to kind of reframe my focus and figure out what am I valuing? I'm valuing performance. I'm not valuing what I look like on the high rocks scene. I'm not valuing what I look like in photos. I'm valuing what is going to be the best for me to perform the best. And I think also going off of that, it was nice to kind of step away from just running full time. I was always a strong runner. I was always somebody who craved being in the weight room, even as like a middle distance runner. I loved our squat days. I would, slap a 45-pound plate on the bar when the other girls were putting 10-pound plates, and I thought it was, oh, cool, look at me. I'm a strong girl. I'm a strong runner and a distance runner. So I always thrived. I always would tell people that if there was an 800 meters with like 50 push-ups at the end and like 15 pull-ups, I would be the national champion. Because, that was always I always was a stronger runner. So finding a sport that kind of mimics that, obviously there's more intricacies to high rocks, but you have to be a strong runner. You have to be a strong athlete. So getting the opportunity to be in high rocks where you can utilize your strengths as a strong runner, you are changing up the stimulus when you're racing, when you're exercising, I think allowed me to capitalize on all my strengths, not just running, but the strength piece of it. It allowed me to just take a step back from running 40 miles a week. My training looks drastically different than it did when I was, 18, 19. But it looks drastically different for the better for the performance for my performance for high rocks. The diversification with like the way that I train is fun. It allows me to stay engaged. It allows me to work on many different things. And the great thing about high rocks is if you can't run, there's a bunch of other things that you can do, whether it's, skiing, rowing, um, pushing a sled, burpeeing. There's always something that you can do when you're injured. And I think that was, a great light at the end of the tunnel for me. When you're a runner and you have a stress fracture, there's not many other things that you can do that bring you a lot of joy. I would be an avid aqua jogger. For those who don't know, it's basically strapping like a little belt on yourself and then literally jogging in the water. Absolutely miserable. That never really brought me joy. You could get on the elliptical, but that's not as fun because you're staring at a screen for 90 minutes. But with high rocks, when you have some injury that perhaps takes away your ability to run, when you're cross training on something else, you're inherently going to be improving your performance in HYROX because there's a lot of stations and a lot of things that you can get good at if running is taken away from you. So I think it's been an awesome journey for me to find a sport that capitalizes on not just running, but all the other things that I wish I would have been able to do while running as an 18, 19-year-old.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Do you limit your running now, like because of the injury risk?
I do. I I don't you know, because of all my injury history and no, I still get injured, and I would like to think it's not from underfueling, but perhaps just a change in intensity or getting used to different stimuli. I have had to change my running volume. I went from consistently 45 miles a week when I was 18 to 22 to probably these days I'm hitting 20 to 25 miles consistently. But for me, it's so much better to focus on being the healthiest version of myself every single day rather than taking the chance at running more frequently and perhaps being injured. So it's been I've gone through ebbs and flows with my running journey even post college. I've tried to do, the whole run 5 days a week plan, and inevitably that still causes me some issue. I had a stress fracture recently last summer after Worlds. And I think what my coach and I have decided is if we can minimize the days of the week that we're running and focus those days of the week on hitting key intensity sessions. So typically having a run session with a high rocks focused session, those are the days that we're going to find and get the most benefit from. So very rarely will I go on like a normal run for like eight-ish miles. This week was a little bit different after DC. I'm trying to shake the legs out pretty frequently, but in general, when I'm in a training block, it's 20 to 25 miles, and those running miles are saved for key intensity sessions. I get a lot of my aerobic volume from the bike, from the ski, from the row, which again is great because when you're putting volume in those machines, you know you're going to get a positive, net positive outcome when you're
Hmm.
racing your next HYROX race. So pretty low volume. I'm a pretty low volume athlete in general. 20 to 25 miles a week, I would say 9 hours of training a week, but it works for me and it works for my schedule. Of course, there's a little voice in my head occasionally of, oh, if I bumped up my volume to like 11 or 12 hours, would I be better? But I think for me, I have a lot on my plate that's external to this sport that fill my cup up as equally as this sport does. So I think if I were to push a little bit more on my training, then that would detract from a lot of other things in my life that I value just as highly. So it's been a journey, but I think, where I'm at with my running and where I'm at with my volume has allowed me to find some pretty good success in this sport so far.
Yeah, 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 definitely. So you're not a full-time athlete then? You're working. You've got a full-time job?
Full-time job. Mhm. Yep,
Okay.
it not only is a full-time job, it's a full-time traveling job. So, every day I'm on the road, going somewhere, doing something. So, it's tough to balance. I won't lie. It's very hard, because I have to be very good with my time. I have to, like if you look at my Google Calendar or my Apple Calendar, I plan out, like, every hour, like, where I'm gonna be, who I'm gonna be seeing, what I'm gonna be doing. I put my workouts in there. I have to be pretty strict with my time. But yeah, full-time job, full-time traveling job. I eat my food in my car every day, breakfast and lunch. It's not glamorous, that's for sure. It's the struggling pro athlete life is, having a full-time job. But to be honest, I think it gives me a lot of fulfillment having something outside of the sport.
Mhm.
And also, I went back to school to get my master's degree. So part of me is like, well, I should probably use it. I should probably have some career so I can have some income to supplement the sport as well.
Yeah. I mean, despite being a full-time, like having a full-time job, you know, relatively limited training hours, you've qualified for the Elite 15 in Stockholm in both
Hmm.
singles and doubles now. So
Hmm.
congratulations. In it,
Thank
like you
you.
qualified for the singles in DC. Did you think that was possible for you going into the race?
Yeah, I think it was possible, and it was a number one goal for me this season. Having a full-time job, I'm very limited when it comes to finding races to go to. So my opportunity to even, make the Elite 15 to make it to a major is pretty minimal. I'm bounded by the restrictions of PTO. So for me, it was, a race Washington, DC. I knew I set myself up to be in the top 15 in the region throughout, the races that I'd run the year previously. So, leading into the race, I thought, uh, there's one spot up for grabs. My mindset is always, why not me? Um, I was very focused in my training and preparation leading into it. But of course, on race day, anything can happen. I've had races where I feel incredible that I'm focused on A races that go horribly wrong. So I was also equally prepared for the opposite to happen. But at the same time, I was, equally excited for the opportunity and equally ready to show people that I'm here. I'm an individual that is able to take a spot for the Elite 15. Um, so yeah, I mean, in general, I would say in general though, for people who watch the race, it went pretty well for me. There was one blip at the end that I know people have been talking about and still will talk about is my wall balls, which I promise everybody that will get cleared up before World Championships. But in general, yeah, I think going into the race, I had the utmost confidence in myself to perform at my highest level. And I knew if I could perform at my highest level, then that position would be up for me. And of course, there's a lot of other ladies in that race that could have easily have qualified. But I put myself in a position, I think, early enough in the race and capitalized on my strengths, which are typically the running and sleds, that I gave myself enough leeway. So when the race did boil down to the end, which is inherently my worst station, that I had enough space to work with. So, when the timer or when the reps were clicking up and I was looking at Carolyn's screen, I'm like, "Oh no, can I do it? Can I do it?" But um, we pulled it out somehow. Insane battle, so much fun. And kind of going on tangent, the reason why the sport keeps me coming back also is the community is second to none. You're racing these girls for an hour and you finish the race, you're depleted, you just qualified for world championships. But the first thing that everybody always does is they come up to you and congratulate you and they hug you and they're as enamored with your performance as you are. And that's like an incredible environment to be in. And I think that's also part of my why is the community. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a community that's as supportive and welcoming and warm as the HYROX community. So, the journey to getting to DC, the journey to winning or not winning, the journey to qualifying for Worlds, was a long time coming. It was something I was very prepared for, I think mentally and physically. And it's just so great when something comes full circle and finally comes to fruition because it has been something I've been chasing for, the better part of 6 years. So amazing race. I'm gonna be definitely, like, thinking about this for a really long time. There's not a day that goes by still. It's been what, like, 9 days? Who knows? Where I'm, like, waking up, like, just reliving the atmosphere, the environment, the camaraderie, just everything about that experience was just second to none.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. I love that because often you hear people say, oh, they achieved something and then very quickly moved on to the next thing and didn't really take time to appreciate it. But you certainly seem
Mhm.
like you are.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still relishing in it. I have like a little what I call is my little shrine to myself in front of my work computer, and it has like the check and my name, and I put a little note on my they give us little like placards with our names on it, and I wrote down, my time and a sentence to remember the moment, and my sentence was I finally did it. And I think that's just the if you can sum it up in one sentence, that has to be the sentence is I finally did it. Finally had an opportunity to do it as well because like I said, the opportunities I can give myself right now are pretty limited.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Awesome. On that shrine, are there goals as well and what you're focused on? Or is it always looking back?
It's always looking back. Because my goals are pretty fluid. I'm not somebody who writes down a goal frequently. When it gets closer to a race, I write down goals because I know what to focus on. But as far as a season goes, my goals and my goalposts change pretty frequently. So right now, we've got some HYROX flags. I hung up my Plum jersey, which super proud of. Cat and I wore for Washington D.C. But as far as goals go, I think every race allows me to shift and focus on a different goal. This race in Washington D.C., I had two primary goals: was capitalize on the run and don't fall apart in the wall balls. So I achieved one, capitalize on the run. The wall balls are still, again, something that I promise I will work on a little bit more, frequently. We'll shore some things up, I know. But I think with goals, there's oftentimes, with that list or with the things that you want to achieve are things that oftentimes don't get achieved. So I like to keep my goals fluid. I like to keep goals that I'm not necessarily looking to do in a season basis, but when a race gets a little bit closer, I want to refocus and reshift and say, okay, what am I working for this race? My main goal, speaking on fluidity though, of course I still have overarching goals that I want to achieve. And my main goal this year was qualify for Elite 15 singles and doubles world championships. So those are done. It's like, what do I do now? I achieved those two things. Well, I think now I get some time. I have a few months to figure out what do I want my goals to be for world championships. I don't want to look too far in the future as far as what do I think I want to do at world championships. I want that to come fluidly. I want that to come from, working on my weaknesses in training, know what I can tackle once race day approaches. But as far as long-term goals in the sport and even moving forward, I think I need to take some time to kind of, reassess and then also allow myself to have that time to figure out what next looks like for me.
Mhm.
Um, I obviously it's great to be part of the Elite 15 in singles and doubles. But I don't want to just be somebody who's part of Elite 15 in 2026 and then their name gets forgotten in 2027 for whatever reason that might be. So, of course, another overarching long-term goal is to be like a name that's in the sport for a long period of time to come. And I think having the years and years of experience in the sport and building up consistency and trusting my training and trusting that it's okay to not run a lot of miles would kind of allow me to stay confident when the stressful situations come, and then when the race day comes to kind of write down what I want to focus on every single day.
Okay, awesome. You you mentioned um, running is a strength of yours, and the sleds are a strength of yours. And I was looking in you were second on the sled push in DC,
Mhm.
and second on the row,
Mhm.
um, which isn't necessarily typical from like a former runner. You wouldn't necessarily expect like the sleds would be their strength. So what do you put that down to? Is it just always been the love for doing a squat as well, or any specific training tips or anything like that you've got?
Sure. So, the row is actually funny because yeah, that also is a strength of mine, and I think the reason being is when I signed that medical hardship waiver in 2018, I convinced myself that I was never going to run again. When a person of authority says you should never run again, you signed this waiver, you threw your running career away. I did take a lot of time off running. Um, but also during that time, I started getting snippets of CrossFit on my Instagram feed. I think the CrossFit Games were approaching that summer of 2018, and I saw these like strong, powerful ladies working out and competing at a super high level. And I kind of did a deep dive into CrossFit as a whole in 2018. And that prompted me to, because my running career was over in college, sign up for a CrossFit gym in my college town. And there I was introduced to the rower and the skier. And it was, throughout mingling with the people that were at the gym and taking some classes that I learned rowing was a really fun way to, bring up my heart rate, sweat a little bit, get a similar stimulus as you would for, running hard or easy. And I sat on that thing for a long period of time. Um, of course, because my sacrum had a fracture in it, it was so funny if people could see me in 2018, I would put a little pillow on the rower so I wasn't sitting on that hard surface. And I would just row and row and row meters and meters because that's the only cardio I was doing at that time. Um, so I think by default, 8 years ago, I was training a piece of HYROX before I even knew I was going to be doing HYROX in 2020 and beyond. So I think that's where my strength in the row comes from, is just the consistency I built nearly 8 years ago when, I was on that rower for literally long periods of time. There was an event at my CrossFit gym in 2018 for it was like a half marathon for time. And I was like, that sounds crazy. I'm going to do it. I like any random crazy fitness competition. I'm like, I'm down. Uh, so I just remember training aggressively for that. And it was great because it gave me an outlet to compete again that I thought I wasn't going to ever be able to do. So I think by default, putting a lot of time in the rower many years ago and then picking up the sport and then realizing, whoa, the rower's in this. That's sick. I remember loving it in 2018 kind of just allowed me to pick up where I left off when I started training for HYROX. And then the sleds, when I train for sleds, and I'm sure a lot of athletes do this. Anytime I have a HYROX workout with a sled in it, I always overweigh it. I'm always putting way more plates on it, making it significantly heavier than I know it will feel and be on race day. And I think that's a good physical stimulus, but also a mental stimulus that I try to train myself while I'm working out, where, say I'm doing a hard run into a sled push. I want that sled push to feel demoralizingly hard. I want it to hurt. I want it to be, in pain. A lot of us are masochists. We love pain in the high rock scene. But I want it to be extremely hard for me because I know, although this training session might, stink, when the race day comes, I want that sled to feel as easy as possible. I want it to feel like butter. I want it to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to it. It's a break from running. So I think that's one thing I've really, dove really into, especially over this last training block, is overweighing my sled. Like putting as many 45 pound plates as my gym has on it and making my sled intervals extremely hard. I think it pays off. It works. The sled push is one of my strengths. Sled pull as well. But I think, with the sled pull, you're kind of limited by the gym equipment, right? Like if you don't have a rope to kind of have a similar-ish stimulus, I try my best on that front. But the sled push has been something I really have been, playing with as far as what can we do to make myself better there. And I think one great tip is overweigh your sleds. Put all those 45-pound weights that your gym has on it. It's gonna stink during training. Like, you're not gonna look forward to it after, doing, running 1,000 meters really hard and then going to a sled push or whatever it might be. But I think inherently it helps prepare you mentally because you're gonna be going to the sled and it's gonna feel a lot easier than it did in training, but also physically. I think there's a lot of adaptations that you're gonna get from, pushing a sled that's, 2 times the women's pro weight. Um, so I think that's kind of what I've been leaning into is overweighing my sleds. And then just like pulling from my row experience that I had when I was, 20-year-old Morgan who was told she can't ever run again. What can we
Okay.
do instead? Let's row.
Are those sled intervals that you're doing training, are they always like 50 meters? Are you mixing up the distances that you're doing and the weights?
Yeah, it depends on the session. My coach and I will have, one day a week where we're doing high rocks distance or greater. So like 50 meters to 100 meters of sled push. But we also have one day a week where we're kind of working on our anaerobic engine where we'll really, really weigh the sled up and just do short bursts of it. So like 12.5 meters or even under, just focusing on speed and power only. So it varies. I think there's merit in doing both. I think there's merit in focusing on pure power and going for short periods of time. But I also think there's merit in doing, long duration sled pushes. Um, the longer it gets, the more I hate the workout because inherently, it's hard. You're using all of your energy when you're pushing that sled, especially when it weighs like 600 or 700 pounds. But I think it just depends on the work that we're doing. More recently, we've been putting a lot of volume on the sled, so I've pushed that sled like 400 meters in totality, which is crazy to think. Like, imagine lining up a sled on the start of a track and just pushing that thing across the one total loop. Like that's crazy. But the volume paid off. Increasing the weight I think has paid off. So now it's just moving on to wall balls. Like let's focus on my next weakness. I think we have a great strategy moving forward. And, moving to my next few races. Um, but yeah, I think that's also another fun piece about HYROX is there's so many ways to train for the same thing. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's is mimicking the exact same training program as myself or the next competitor to the left and right of me. But that's what keeps it fun and that's what keeps it engaging. I think number one priority for me is am I progressing? Am I getting better? And also am I enjoying the training? The second it becomes not enjoyable, the second I start to rethink like why is it not enjoyable for me? Do I need to change up the stimulus? Should I decrease the weight of the sled because I'm becoming too miserable in my workouts? I think that's the great part about HYROX is the fluidity of HYROX. You can do so many different things, adapt to so many different stimuli. But my goal for myself is always, am I having fun? In the moment, I'm sometimes not. But after the fact, was that a successful workout? Did I enjoy it? And did I get better every single day?
On the subject of having fun, on the runs in DC, it looked like you were smiling throughout, which is it's come up a couple of times on here on the podcast, like
Mhm.
almost forcing a smile, like it's good for the mind. Is that something that you're deliberately doing, or are you just happy?
I think, you know what? I don't think it's deliberate. I think sometimes when you're racing and you hear people cheering for you, it allows you to take a step back in a sense. And I think the moments that you see me smiling are moments that I feel very grateful for the opportunity to have a body that allows me to do this, grateful to have the opportunity to compete at this high level with all these amazing ladies. And at the end of the day, if you strip it all down and break it all down to its core, we're just athletes running around a convention center on concrete doing like crazy exercises 8 times. It's so cool. It's cool that people care. It's cool that people cheer for you. And I think throughout the entirety of DC, I felt the utmost gr- like gratitude. I heard the cheers. I heard people yelling my name. And I think in general it's been really cool to be in the sport from kind of ground zero till now. I remember racing in New York City in 2020 where there weren't really spectators at all. And people were getting lost on the course, and you would like skip a station and then accidentally and be like, oh, shoot, I forgot to do the farmer's carry, and then go back and do the farmer's carry. And that was okay back then. So, like, being in a place where the sport is so much more serious, but still being, near the top and, craving to be at the top of the sport um, just made me feel a lot of gratitude during that race. Sometimes that smile might get confused for like a pain smile.
Mhm.
Pain smile is weird, but it's kind of like a grimace that perhaps the sides of my lips go up a little bit and it looks like I'm smiling. Because I do wear a lot of pain on my face, especially on the row. That thing hurts. I love it, but it's pretty painful. The whole race is pretty painful. But in general, it's like so much gratitude for getting the opportunity to race some of the top athletes in my country and then also in the world when we go to world championships.
I often ask on here like where your mind goes during the race to help you in those tough times, and so it is like the sort of two questions, like is it gratitude? Is that what you mainly lean on during a race? And then also you've told me in the past that um sometimes when you're running you talk to yourself and
Yes,
and
I
and
do. Uh-huh. I think it's something that I have started to do because it detracts me or takes me away from the pain that I feel while I'm working out. You would think, "Oh, how can you talk when you're working out if it hurts so bad?" You can talk. You can get a word or two out when I'm running fast on the assault runner or pushing a sled really hard. Like I can get a word out. And sometimes it's as simple as just saying something silly or stupid or reminding myself what I'm eating for dinner that night, which is typically the conversation that I have with myself is like, "Oh, what's for dinner?" Okay, salmon, potatoes, broccoli. It just kind of brings me back to earth in a sense because when your heart rate's 190 and you're breathing so hard and freaking out because you don't want the person behind you to catch you. Sometimes something as simple as just saying something. For me, I like to say something silly because it just brings me back to earth in a sense. But um, sometimes I have full blown conversations with myself, mainly when I'm training. Sometimes during races, I talk to myself a little bit. Um, Perhaps sometimes people catch me doing it, but I'll just tell myself to go, like, "Go Morgan, go Morgan." You know, a little bit of cheers to myself. It helps me. It helps just reframe my mindset a little bit, like, "Hey, I'm still talking, I'm okay. Like, you can finish this race." If you're able to, blurt out a little sentence or a few words here and there. Um, and I think, like, also having such a competitive field, not just in North America, but, a lot of the races that I go to, having individuals that are not going to falter, that are behind me, I know they're coming. I know there's people that are as fast as me. I know there's people that are as strong as me, experienced or inexperienced. I think we've found in this sport, especially this year, you're going to have people that have never done it before and are going to find extreme success early on. So I try to have myself not get too comfortable. Sometimes when you're hurting, it's super easy to take your foot off the gas a little bit, conserve energy perhaps for a later station. But I know somebody is always coming. So what can I do to kind of kick myself into gear a little bit to get the most out of myself? I always just say something to myself. Go Morgan has been my recent thing that I've been saying in races. But yeah, like I said in training, I talk to myself. Typically, it's just something stupid or sometimes I'll just be, repeating the music that's in my ears, kind of singing. I do sing when I work out too, even if I'm working out hard, it just kind of makes me feel I'm taking it a little bit less serious while still getting the most that I can out of my workout. And another fun fact actually that I was just thinking of as we're talking is when I'm working out, I'm very rarely listening to music. My main thing that I listen to, and this kind of ties into the theme of what we've been talking about, is I listen to true crime podcasts. Even when I'm working out really hard, I will have a podcast going in my ears. For similar reason, where if I'm in a position where I'm hurting so hard, this is just so tough. At least I'm focused on some conversation that's going on in my ears. Okay, they're talking about, this crazy mystery thing that happened in 2005. Like, it kind of detracts me from the feeling that I'm feeling, whether it's hard threshold repeats or I'm pushing a sled really hard or I'm doing burpee broad jumps. It's nice to have a little distraction. So for me, that distraction comes in the form of true crime podcasts. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe other people do it. I think it's been my method to the madness is just doing what I can to take away the pain in the moment.
Okay, okay. Can you concentrate on what's being said in the podcast when you're training? I struggle to
Usually
focus.
not. Usually not. So that's a good point too, is if you really want to know what happens in the podcast you're listening to, you probably should re-listen to it after you finish your workout.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
Okay.
there's blips of time where I'm like focused on it like really intently, but I typically don't have the context from, the previous 10, 15 minutes because I've been focused on, my workout. But yeah, I can't get myself to listen to music because I mean, I will on occasion, but for me, like for long, like hard sessions, I have to have a podcast going. So I can just, the second I start thinking about my pain, let me just think about what's going on in my ears instead. And for me, music, it's sure, but like they're short bursts of slides, like 3 minutes at a time. I need something that's long that I can listen to a conversation. It calms me down. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up because it's kind of synonymous to me just like saying random things to myself. It's because I have random things going on in my ears when I listen to a true crime podcast while I work out.
Okay. What's the podcast of choice?
So there's a few that I really like. Crime Junkie is a classic, OG crime show. I started listening when they first came out, I think in 2015. I'm an avid listener. They come out every Monday. There's another one called Mr. Ballin. He's an ex Navy SEAL who is a fantastic storyteller, and he does a lot of like murder, crime, true crime mysteries, but he has a great storytelling voice. So when I put him on, it's like you could just get mesmerized by the things that he's saying. There's another recent one that I've been really liking called Murder with My Husband. It's basically a woman and a man, and the man hates true crime, but his wife tells him these true crime stories, and he's just there listening. I like to watch the one on YouTube because his facial expressions are so funny. He's like, what am I getting myself into? I hate true crime." So that was like a fun, silly one. But Mr. Ballin is typically my go-to.
Okay.
Great storytelling. And I drive a lot for work, so I'm constantly listening to true crime podcasts. It's typically the one of the few podcasts or genres of podcasts that I get into pretty good.
Okay. Okay. To go back to the training a little bit, do you have are most of your days quite hard? Are you mixing up hard and easy days? What does it look like high level?
So high level, I work out 6 days a week. 4 of those days are easy days. And the easy day can change as far as what I'm doing, like easy ski, easy bike, easy row. Very rarely an easy run, kind of like what we talked about previously. Just a way to get some aerobic, work done in like a 60 to 90 minute time frame. And then I have two hard workouts a week. Those two hard workouts are very high rocks focused. Earlier in the season, they're a little bit less volume, as I'm building my way up, and then depending on where I'm at in the block of training, will kind of either increase volume or increase intensity. So those 2 days a week are HYROX sim-like, is what I say. So they might be, a hard run into a station with a little bit of rest, or like hard run station, hard run with a little bit of rest. But it's typically interval based. A thorough warm up, high rocks session, and then we try and always end with some sort of EMOM focusing on a specific station. So for me, the next like 12 weeks are obviously going to be a lot of EMOMs with wall balls. Like I said, that's been a little bit of a theme of this podcast is we are going to fix those things. It's not like I don't do them frequently, but I think it's a glaring weakness in my race is what can we do to shore those things up. So those 2 days a week, typically one's a little bit shorter and more intense, and then one's a little bit longer and less intense, more like high rocks race pace focus. Crazy to say that's not intense. That is still very intense. But the shorter ones are like running like 5K pace, mile pace, like really fast intervals until like a really fast station with longer rest. I love the way that I'm training. It allows me to go into those 2 days a week feeling really fresh. I'm not trying to cram a third day of intensity in. And I also thoroughly enjoy the days where I can, sit on the bike for 90 minutes or sit on the elliptical for 90 minutes. As much as it is nice to recover physically, it's also really nice to recover mentally and like, reset. If a bad workout happens, inevitably they do, at least the next day you're going to get in something that's a little bit less intense, that you kind of reflect on the workout previously, and that you're not so stressed out going into another hard day like 2 days after. So that's been the method of my madness for the last few years, is just 2 hard days, 4 easy days. And it's just consistent and constant progress. Like I didn't get to the Elite 15 in like a month. It took me 6 years of, fine tuning my training, finding what works for me. And I think at the same time, like the best training program that I would advocate for all people to follow is one that you love. I think perhaps there's something that I could be doing that might make me a better high rocks athlete, quote unquote. But what I'm doing right now is something that I'm absolutely enjoying. It allows me to be a really good professional person. I'm not training 15 hours a week because I don't have the time for it. But it allows me to focus on, high rocks. And when I'm in the gym, I'm solely focused on my training. So for me, that's worked. I think if I were to add another day of intensity, it might be a little bit too much, but the 2 days hard, 4 days easy is then just my method, my tried and true method for the past few years.
Okay, awesome. And you mentioned just on the running, like sometimes you do like super fast, like mile or 5K pace. You think that's beneficial for high rocks? Like, there's a lot of people doing like a lot of threshold work and maybe not going beyond that, but you think it's worthwhile?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile because I think, when you get to a level where you're competing with people who are as fast as someone like Warren Weeks and, and Vivian and Meg and all the ladies that are at the top of the sport, there are going to be races where they go out at 5:15 mile pace, right? So you're going to be inherently you're going to want to go out hard too. Maybe not 5:15 mile, maybe like 5:40, but still, I want to be able to feel that stimulus at the start of a race and like mimic that in training. And I think when you're at the high level, you want to focus on things that are really intricate. So for me, the intricacy might be that first run in a high rocks. How can I mimic that in training? It's like, okay, well, let's do short bursts of speed into a station. See how my heart rate comes down on the station, or see how my heart rate stays up on that station. I think there's a lot of rhyme or reason for doing a lot of variety in training for HYROX, whether it's running really hard for a short period of time or running threshold. I think threshold is great, focusing on long duration, time under tension at a pretty high heart rate is important for, developing your aerobic capacity. But there's also a lot to say with training short bursts, like short interval sprinty style. I want to be prepared for everything when I get to a HYROX race. I want to be prepared to go out at 5:15 pace if that's needed to, be near the top. So what can we do to get there? It's let's do these shorter, more intense intervals, 400 meters really hard into like a 12.5 meter sled push, just to mimic a potential opportunity, potential race scenario that might happen, whether it's, at the DC championships. We saw Lauren go out really hard. That's her MO. That's been her MO for a long period of time. And I want to be in a position where that doesn't scare me. So I think implementing that one day a week in training is a way that I've been able to kind of prepare for a situation like that. And also, coming from a sprinting background, those workouts just make me really excited to do. As much as it would be great to have another threshold day in my training per week, I think this another theme that I've been kind of talking about is just enjoyment in training, and those workouts are so much fun to me. I love it's a crazy thing to say that I love feeling the buildup of lactic acid in your legs, but it's kind of cool to see what you can do after that buildup happens. It's like, okay, I ran 400 meters really hard, but now I got to push a sled really hard. Like, how does my body react? Like, can I do it? So I think being really uncomfortable in any method, in any way that you're training, really prepares you for the HYROX race. Whether it's threshold training or anaerobic training, I think there's lots of ways that you can get the same result in the sport. In general, it's how long can you be uncomfortable for? And then in what way do you want to get there? Threshold, great. Short anaerobic sessions, also great.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything you you think about training like for HYROX or performance that you think a lot of people would disagree with?
Yeah, for sure. I think you don't need to run a lot to be a successful HYROX athlete. I think people, you know, probably think, the race is 8,000 meters. That's like nearly 5 miles. And not only is it nearly 5 miles, you're on your feet doing a station and you're out there for 60 plus minutes. I think there's a preconceived idea that, the more you run, the better that you're gonna get at running. I think that's true, and I think that's true up until a point, though. Like I said, I found success in the sport while running 20 to 25 miles a week, and I don't think one cookie cutter plan for somebody to run 40 plus miles a week is going to work for everybody. I think it depends on your body. It depends on what you're interested in. It depends on what you need to work on. I think there's a lot of ways that you can improve your aerobic capacity for HYROX. There's a lot of ways you can improve your running for HYROX without actually running. When I was injured in college, of course, I would aqua jog, which I hated, but we also elliptical a lot. And I think ellipticaling is a similar enough stimulus to running, where you're kind of getting the similar movement pattern, while moving your legs back and forth. And you can also get your heart rate up pretty high. So I think there's a lot of merit for people supplementing running with other, either fitness stations or cross training implements that kind of mimic running and allow you to get your heart rate up into a specific zone that you want to train in. So and maybe people would agree that you don't need to run a lot for HYROX, but I think it's something I'm very passionate about, that you don't need to be running 40 plus miles a week to improve your running. If you can, that's awesome. And if you know you're not going to get injured, that's awesome. And I'm jealous, but I think, having the ebbs and flows in my training that are closely correlated to my injury history has allowed me to kind of realize that you don't need to be a high volume runner to be a good runner. I think that's one thing that I've learned throughout my entire running career. You don't need to run 40 miles a week to, be a fast runner in HYROX. It's what can you do outside of running that still gives you a similar stimulus that allows you to have success in the sport.
I'm a relatively recent convert to the elliptical. Like I'd always turn my nose up at it until about 6 months ago, and then I was like, do you know what? It actually gets my heart rate up, and you can do a ton of volume on it if you want to. So yeah.
volume. I remember doing like crazy elliptical workouts when I was in college that my heart rate could get up as high as it could when I was doing a running session.
Yeah.
It's just how hard do you want to push on that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right to do a lot of volume in that. If you're not somebody who can go run a 10-mile long run on the weekend, you supplement that with a cross training implement? Yeah, get on the elliptical. I think it's a great stimulus. When I was in high school and I had a stress fracture, I did all of my volume on the elliptical, came back, ran a race like 1 week after coming back from my injury and ran a PR. I think that's a testament to cross-training devices. Like if you can't run, you can still get really fit. And you hear a lot of NCAA athletes who, are out due to stress, or NCAA runners that are out due to stress fractures, and they put a lot of time on the elliptical and they find pretty good success once they get back. So I think that's a great resource, great tool for somebody who might be a little bit more injury prone and or doesn't want to, bump their mileage up so drastically, is just supplementing with something like the elliptical.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you. I know we're running out of time. So, is there anything else I should have asked you before we finish up? And also, like, if people want to follow you, find out more about you, where should they
For
go?
sure. For sure. Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is just Morgan.Schulz. Um, One more thing, I'm trying to think of like another fun fact that might be cool for people to know. Oh, so like I said, I do HYROX. I have a full-time job, but I also have another hobby that I'm really getting into recently, and it's actually making music. I'm really into EDM, electronic dance music, and for Christmas this year, my parents got me this like DJ turntable thing that I can actually
Okay.
make tracks on. And, when I have like free time at the end of the day, I've just been, vibing on that thing, trying to find cool beats to mix. But in general, like my lifestyle might not mimic another lifestyle in the Elite 15 as far as, the time that I'm able to put into exercise or training, and the time that I'm able to put into recovery or other tools that people might use to be at the top. But I think what fills me up the most is having things outside of the sport that I have equal value in, that bring my cup all the way to the top. Um, so yeah, these hobbies bring me enjoyment, and they also help me take the sport and my performances a lot less seriously.
Awesome. I used to have some decks when I was a kid as well,
Did
like
you
that.
really?
Yeah, yeah, vinyls. It's moved on a little bit since then, but yeah, I used to love that.
It's so
Um,
cool. So fun.
uh, is Instagram the place to go if people want to follow you?
Yes, Instagram would be the best. Morgan.Schulz.
Okay, all right, amazing. Thank you for this. It's been brilliant. Good luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Take care.